So there's more intensity of light. The sun is doing the climate change. The climate change is not only in the planet Earth, it's in the whole solar system because it comes from the sun. And things will happen in the future, but we just have now a lot of more cosmic rays coming in because the solar minimums are getting larger and more expanded in time. Maybe it's even the solar maximum will be on 2025 when a lot of things would have gone through. And people will know that there's holes in the magnetosphere and sunstorms can come right into us and cut electricity. So that's by 2025 when we have that crisis coming, and we have to have all of these solutions in medicine. So sun gives more light, we have more cosmic rays, we can even get ultraviolet because there's no protection. It's not about the ozone hole, it's a magnetic hole. They call it Atlantic anomaly and the Pacific anomaly and the African anomaly that can go into Europe. So those anomalies, these holes, will actually these places that have total ultraviolet. And they know it in South America. So that is creating a biological evolution. Yeah. The biological evolution is simple, that we are getting more immune system. So we are getting stronger immune system because we have stronger light, and Wi-Fi's, all Wi-Fi's 3G, 4G, and even more 5G, bring down the immune system because we are bombarded with radio frequencies, and we don't feel nothing. I had leukemia from nuclear radiation, from gas radon. You don't feel nothing. It comes later, cancer in 20 years later. It appears as cancer. So, you don't know that you're already in the process of cancer because of all these, nuclear plants, nuclear radiations, all of these bad things, because everybody talks about the atmosphere, but nobody talks about the nuclear plants. And who controls when there has been the radiation, because nobody sees it, something that is invisible, and something that even if you get it, you don't even know it, that you have been irradiated, because it appears as cancer 16 and 20 years later. Well, obesity is one of the marks, because the grease is, the fat is actually saving you from it going into the bone marrow. That happened to me. But from that, nobody knows that they're already in the process, because I'm telling you, it's 15, in my case, exactly 20 years later.
Yeah, another thing is, it's good to have a gamma detector around just for some of this. I remember when I was in France, and there was a solar flare happening at the same time, and I was just checking a few things out, and then it starts beeping. So, okay, well, where am I? These are it's shale. It shouldn't be beeping. So I go underneath a rock outcropping. It goes back down to normal.
In the shade.
In the shade. So I put it back out in the sunlight because, gamma radiation is directional. So I put it out in the sunlight, and then it starts beeping again, 120 counts per minute. So over 100 counts per minute, the alarm goes off.
First of all, we are totally adaptable. That's the thing why they can't get us, because we adapt. We have an amazing capacity of adapt. The problem is that we have adapted to bad habits. We have adapted to a lot of distractions. And we have adapted that doctors are the only ones that know about our body. Now we have to adapt to positive situations, which is what we can do. And light, an intensity more of light that's coming little by little, is creating this evolution where we're going to have we're going to recover the immune system that we had when we were babies. We're also going to recover the capacity to go back in time, our cells to regenerate. That is the fourth dimension, because the three dimensions is, the 3 dimensions of space, left, right, and deep, whatever you want, vertical, horizontal, and depth. It's 3 dimensions. Fourth dimension is that moves in time, and that we can move in time. Time is circular, it's not only linear, and that we can in our dream state we can go back in time. Well, we're going to start moving back in time to regenerate, and that's entering. We are entering into the fourth dimension. We have technology for the fourth dimension, and that's what it is. We are not in the fifth dimension. A lot of people talk about the fifth dimension when actually they don't even understand what the fifth dimension is. Because if the fourth dimension is time, and we're talking about physical, maybe we actually the fourth dimension is about synchronicity. Because everything sort of fits perfectly, synchronous, and everything happens like, look, if I would have come 5 seconds later, I wouldn't have missed this thing.
Right.
Everything fits. Oh, I think I didn't reach that on time because I will be late. No, you were perfectly on time. The person came at the right time, at the same time as you came. You found this exactly the centimeters that you needed. Oh, it's not even 1 centimeter more or less. I went into that shop and I found exactly what I needed. I don't need to look for this or that. When you are in synchronicity, you are in contact with your higher self. You are in contact with yourself, with what you are doing in your life. You are really in synchronicity in the fourth dimension. And that is what's happening. Well, now, they talk about the fifth dimension because it's a song.
Yeah, the Age of Aquarius, fifth dimension. Yeah, and up and away.
So, but
yeah.
let's just, what is the fifth dimension?
The fifth dimension is at right angles to to the other 3 physical dimensions. In other words, we can't see it. So that's another thing. And also at right angles to the time dimension as well. Well, if it's a dimension of space, it's one thing. Dimension of time. If you're talking about another dimension of time, then the fourth dimension has a forward and backward. Okay. Then, if you're talking about another dimension of time, that's probabilities. Now, what that means is that
you have so many.
yeah. Now you can actually surf the probabilities back and forth in time, which means that now you can change the structures, and then if you're moving back in time, now moving forward in time, you have Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which means it's impossible to know where you're going. But if you apply the negative time side to it, now instead of undeterminacy, you've got determinacy. Instead of having no way of knowing where you're going, you absolutely know where you're going. In other words, you can switch the probabilities around, engineer the outcome, and then this is direct reality engineering. I mean, this is really powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what we'd be getting into eventually. We're not there yet.
No,
but
we have to observe where we are with synchronicity, with regeneration, with adaptability.
Right. Yeah.
With real also. Getting back the immune system of the thymus gland. That's why it has to do with feeling others more and love.
Yeah.
Because it has to do the lymphocytes T that we are recovering, which is the ones we lost the moment we started speaking. Because the hyoid bone comes down to the larynx, and we have these amazing sounds that babies don't have because they're more deep sounds. So that's one of my research, one of my discoveries, as well as not seeing aura because the optic nerves are stuck to the bone. That's why we don't see aura. So those things are what are going to be started to change and start to see more subtleties.
Is that when you're doing healing and you back up the body to a specific point in time, but genetically you have the predisposition of getting that illness again, what you can do is change the probabilities around as you're backing it back up. So instead of a linear direction, you're actually curving the direction so that when it comes back to that point in the present again, you're not going to be predisposed to that illness.
Yeah, but the gene therapy can also change some of those things, no? That's genetic manipulation is a very, very dangerous, but there's going to be...
But we're talking about probabilities instead of the genetics, so that with the genetics, the genetics will give you a predisposition, but the probabilities also have a role to play in that. So if you change the probabilities, you don't have to change the genetics, and it'll actually change those probabilities.
And that will be more with consciousness.
Right, yeah.
So it's about consciousness, about being conscious of where you are, what you're doing, and connecting thought, feeling, and action together at the moment, the right moment, being totally conscious. So in that case, we're getting into something that Elizabeth and I love, which is the 4Ts. And we have a lot of conversations about that. We're only going to give you a little bit about that. But this is, the 4Ts is where we will get to. We first have to get, the intuition comes from the thymus, because it can feel in the back as well as the front. It's opening, it's everything that has to do with our hands, our arms, opening ourselves. So once we are able to intuit, have a complete trust in your intuition, this is where it's really trusting our intuition. That's where we are in now. We all have to trust our intuition and synchronicity to learn how to guide our life, because there's no such thing as straight line, there's no such thing as no problems. We have to welcome the problems because it's more learning. We have, let's say, oh, now I have to come up with another solution instead of calling it problem. But in this case, the intuition is first, then the telepathy. If you don't trust your intuition, if you don't have to, how are you going to have telepathy? You know,
Yeah.
everybody's involved with telepathy, and telepathy has to do about the pineal gland, and you know, it's this optic nerve stuck to the sphenoid bone, very important sphenoid bone. But a lot of videos I have about these subjects out there, not in English, but they're in Spanish, of using telepathy. So telepathy depends upon intuition, because we can have telepathy with reading other people's minds, which we do. We can have telepathy by knowing you want to call somebody and suddenly they call you. We have those little glimpses, moments of telepathy. Nobody denies that. But that is not the telepathy of actually reading people's thoughts all the time. And we have to think about, if we read people's thoughts all the time, how do you discern, I can't read this now? How do you protect from somebody not reading your thoughts? How do we protect the privacy of that? You know, that is something we have to think about. And for that, we have to be more connected to our higher self, so we know how to protect ourselves or allow certain people to read our thoughts, or to communicate without talking, which we know that exists, that we have actually experienced it if we were able to talk or have communication with dead people. I've had, and it's telepathy that was directed to you. So there's many things on telepathy that we haven't really gotten into yet, but we will be able to. But the most important thing is intuition. Recovering the intuition, recovering the thymus gland.
Yeah.
Want to say something more?
Oh, there's a lot of nonverbal communication that goes on all the time. I mean, we feel that with animals as well. You know, it's not just facial expressions, which are blocked by the masks, by the way, but it's more than the intonation of the voice, because they can pick up on things without saying a word, and we can pick up on them without saying a word. So.
Yeah, and also I would say one of my studies is about dolphins. Dolphins, they are actually communicate everything with emotions, with sound. It's the way they finish the ball, and bola, that word, ball, if they change the end of it, it's the emotion. And that's why they have a lot more vocabulary than us. Because we pick up the emotions of others with the micro gestures. We have a lot of little micro gestures that you intuitively pick up some things, and then you know what people's intentions are, or what's hidden behind. They don't have micro gestures, they have always smiling, So they pick up that with sound. Then telekinesis. Telekinesis comes from, it's moving objects with your magnetic field. So then the magnetic field also depends on your emotions. The magnetic field is your aura. So it's just, you have to be very fully in your body and fully in yourself to be able to know how to have a magnetic field that you can bring something towards you and you can push it out. That is a complete emotional state that we're not there yet. Even though we know that there's people that can do it, and there's children that are being born that can do it. And those two are probably the ones that are closest to us that we can develop. I don't know how much we can develop some of us, or that the children being born couldn't develop. And we're still in the fourth dimension.
About the telekinesis, actually there's two different types. There's telekinesis and pyrokinesis, and Ingo Swann did both. And what he could do is actually concentrate on a thermometer, and the mercury would go up. And then they said, oh, it's just electromagnetic. Let's put it in a Faraday cage and see what happens. So they did. The mercury still went up. So, okay. So what he's doing is not using transverse electromagnetics. It's actually interferometry, and it's recombining at that point, and that's making the temperature go up.
And it will go through the Faraday cage.
It would go through the Faraday cage.
It's so powerful.
And that's that powerful. So the other thing is that we also know that, for example, when we move something, then what happens is that it's longitudinal photons that are actually being transferred that produce the movement. So if it's the longitudinal photons doing that, I don't have to poke it with my finger. I can actually use a source of longitudinal photons that can actually pump into that, and then that would produce motion. That's telekinesis. So you can actually produce motion at a distance that way.
If we use our intuition correctly, we have to know that there is no way to explain mechanically how we can move so fast when we're doing some sports or dance, and with no mechanical explanation how you could actually pick up a glass falling. It's because you intuited before that it was going to fall, that actually you actually were able to mechanically catch it. So we are constantly intuiting these things involuntarily. We don't even know we do it, because if you see it fall and then you go to reach it, it fell. It never reached it. So we have to know that that is abilities that are happening around us all the time, the same as the little telepathies, things that we are constantly living. So these two might go in hands when we are knowing what time reversals and what time is.
But that's another thing, is that in that realm, there really isn't any reason, because we're doing time reversal to heal ourselves. You can actually have a signal coming from some point in the future, and then that could be a telepathic contact with you, and so, no, I shouldn't go there and do that. And because that's like a warning signal from the self in that parallel timeline. Don't go over here because there's going to be a brick falling on your head, that sort of thing. And then that signal would come to you, and then you'll get that feeling that, no, I shouldn't go there. So what happens if you don't go there? Well, that means that that signal that came from that alternate self, it did its job. I mean, you're not there, and you're in a different path.
Well, I have to ask people to really be aware every time that they actually know what's happening before. You actually thought that they were going to steal from you. You actually thought before that you could fall. You actually thought before that you could get an accident. You actually thought that you could lose something. It's that our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions have to be together in the right moment in the now, and be aware of it be aware of all your hidden thoughts, because that's exactly what happens, is that I thought it and it happened. Okay, so maybe we can get in the fourth dimension, I thought it and I avoided it.
Yeah.
That's where we're going. You know, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's
And
also...
that's not the fifth dimension, that's the fourth dimension.
Yeah, it's basically a telepathic contact with your future self in that particular time.
Exactly.
So,
You see, a
yeah.
lot of times I know that I am in contact with my future self, and I pick up things that maybe I don't understand now, but I will understand
Afterwards.
in a certain time.
Yeah.
So these could be abilities that we could be regaining in this fourth dimension where we're entering and when we are already now. And we have to join, humanity joining with this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, 0 degrees of Aquarius is entering the Aquarian era, finally, and we have to do it all together. We have to be a one voice, and no matter how difficult it is, when we have the same enemy, we will join. And we'll see what happens from then. So these are the abilities that are within us in our possibility of our near future. But then there's the other two T's, which are more, which is teletransportation and stopping time. Those are more abilities that we would gain further on in between the fourth and fifth dimension. And the teletransportation has to do with your eyes. It's like you would have X-rays in your eyes, and you will be able to see the filaments of the magnetic field that connects everything. You know, the filaments that are now getting totally disheveled because we're in a magnetic pole shift, and that's why birds are going crazy and getting lost and appearing on top of a parking or where they didn't have to appear, while dolphins and whales are also getting lost and going to beaches, and I hope they find their way. And this is happening, and that's also they be able to see with X-rays the filaments that actually the birds see to navigate, and the dolphins and all the migrating animals see these magnetic fields that why now they're changed to what they wind up somewhere else that they didn't want to. They were going to warm weather and they got diverted to another weather. It wasn't, they don't know where they are, and that's why they die or they get lost. But that be able to see that is be able to separate certain magnetic fields to be able to find the wormhole, and that's teletransportation. That's my explanation.
Yeah,
This is
so
what you say.
another thing is that we know that there are wormholes down at the quantum foam level. That's the nano. I mean, it's way down, and it's down at the quantum foam level. There are all these wormholes being generated and collapsing constantly. So we know about that one. And here's an example of something like that. Is there's something called a tunnel diode, and on the tunnel diode, what happens is that the electron diode. It's a component. I mean, it's inside of a lot of electronics that we're using. And what happens is that the electron disappears in one side of the barrier, turns into a probability wave, and then it reappears on the other side. I mean, it does this a lot. I mean, that's how currents are flowing through the diode, as billions of electrons are disappearing in one side of the junction, reappearing in the other.
And we also could be, that's happening to our physical body too, no? Appearing and reappearing in different time shifts or time spaces, so parallel universes. So we are solidified in one that we've decided to be with. We also could change timelines, so jump parallel universes.
Yeah, so in other words, if you could do this instead of just billions, trillions, or quadrillions, if you do that quadrillions, or I mean a lot of atoms at a time, then what you can do is you can change the entire human body into basically a collection of potential waves, of quantum potentials, probability waves. And then what you do is you lower the probability of being where you are down to 0, and you raise the probability of being somewhere else up to 100%. So it just goes this way. And then you vanish here, you reappear there. That's it. That's quantum teleportation.
And actually, there is such thing as star cakes, not that difficult to make.
A man by the name of Alan Holt actually talked about this in 1981 in the Second International Symposium on Non-Conventional Energy, and he actually had a protocol for doing that. And he said that this is possible. It's like the transporter in Star Trek. You basically can vanish over here and reappear over there. So, and then Jerry Gallimore also said,
we know, who knows, maybe I didn't know. Now I should say that Elizabeth was part of a group of engineers that were asked to do a new internet, and not only they found LiFi, which is internet by LED lights, which I talked before, and that's what we need. It will go faster than 5G. That I won't
way
get into
faster,
that.
yeah.
But they also discovered in 1983 teletransportation of data, which now one of them divulged it because it was for militaries. They didn't know they were working for militaries, and of course they got a disclosure. Gadget with a crystal and another gadget and a crystal, it would communicate to the other side of the Earth or to Jupiter with no interference.
Yeah.
This was discovered in 1983 by her and her group of other electrical engineers in general. So just imagine maybe they do have this teletransportation of people. We don't know what is out there.
Yeah.
They actually, there is information there that they say they do.
Yeah.
But now if you discovered the teletransportation of data in 1983, they have gone further.
With matter.
So that is part of the teletransportation T.
Yeah.
But then there's another T, which is StopTIME. And that one is the most of all, which is you can actually stop time. We've seen these things in movies. They tell us about movies. So then you can stop time and do other things and then come back to put time together again. How can we imagine we can get to that?
It's basically accelerating time personally while everything else is still moving at the same rate. So it's the flip side of time dilation. Time dilation basically means that time is slowing down and everything else is moving at the same rate, so that you're moving in slow motion. And the other side of that is when instead of you moving in slower motion, you're moving faster than everything else, which makes everything else appear to move slower.
But what capacity, biological capacity, can we get to reach that?
I know what's necessary in physics, and that would be to, instead of raising the mass of the body, lowering the mass of the body. And I think this is part of the teletransportation problem, because when Otis T. Carr was doing his experiments with the OTC-X1, he noticed that if you drop the mass of the vehicle down to zero, then the people that were on board the craft had to simultaneously visualize where the craft was going to go. And then when they rematerialized, that's where the craft would be. Now,
so it's a question of visualization. It has to be more than that.
Yeah, because it takes energy to move mass around in normal space-time. But if the mass of the whatever you're inside of drops to zero, even your body, then it's wherever you're visualizing, that's where you go. Good example of this is in the Philadelphia experiment, when the sailors when the ship dematerialized, they really wanted to go to this one bar in Philadelphia. They actually materialized there.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But what we know of the Philadelphia experiment, because they have movies of it, and it was true. When was it? The 40s?
It was in the 40s.
In the 40s,
yeah.
Okay, in the 40s. It was a long time. Even before you got to this teletransportation of data.
Yeah.
So that we know that they appeared, they dematerialized a boat that appeared in the desert, and that people were caught inside the boat because the body was caught because the metal was.
It was in a state of flux.
Was not there, so suddenly it it froze again to its matter, and they were caught there. So these are things that are almost science fiction, and I think we are living a very science fiction moment at this moment too. So it's a collective one, and we have to avoid psychosis, and we have to stop watching television. I don't have television for 30 years.
But the interesting part is that if all that you have to do is to take the mass of the body and then through a field effect drop the mass to zero, then wherever you think you're going to go, you're going to go. You can materialize there. There was a movie called Jumper that did this.
But then we have absolute control of our body and of our biological field, of our biological body.
Yeah.
We have total control of it. So definitely there's no illness.
Yeah.
Because we have control even to do that.
There was there was a book called The Mind Travelers by Brad Steiger, and he talks about all the weird stuff like this where, I mean, you had telepathy, which is quantum entanglement with another brain somewhere. Or you had teletransportation, which is more like quantum entanglement between here and there, where what happens is you entangle with that volume of space elsewhere, and then again, I mean, the probability of being here goes down, probability there goes up, and poof, you're there, that sort of thing. So, and that's happened. Yogis can do this. I mean, they've actually been known to do this. Some magicians have been caught doing it, like Dynamo. Dynamo said that, oh, it's just magic. But what happened was he got his timing wrong, and he had an object that was up on a shelf, and it disappeared from this, and this is in video, it disappeared from the shelf, reappeared over here before he could put the cloth over it. And then it just, whoop, it was right there. And so, oops. So he did that. So he knows how to do that trick.
So you mean that we could do it in this third, fourth dimension?
Yeah, I think we could do it.
We don't have to wait for that.
We don't have to wait for the mechanical stuff to do it.
Teletransportation, but stopping time?
Stopping time, that's actually changing frequency domains. And so that what you're doing is you're changing the frame around the body itself. So we actually have a time field around our bodies, and it locks us into the local time field. But I think that lock kind of gets decoupled during some emotional states, because whenever there's something that happens, usually you see time just moving a lot slower, like during an accident, for example.
I forgot to say something too, is that schizophrenics levitate.
Okay.
And that was told to me by several people that took care of them. They do levitate. That's why they hold them, they tie them down.
They have to tie them down because they start going out.
Real schizophrenic levitate.
Yeah, okay.
And I asked to a doctor, he said, well, a guy that would take care of them told me. But then I asked a doctor, a psychiatrist, and he said, well, I haven't seen them levitate, but I saw them like sitting in a chair in the air, which is impossible. The chair is not there, and you touch the muscles, and they're loosely, like they're sitting in a chair. And they have these impossible positions, which he said, that I can tell you that I have seen it.
Yeah, so they're imagining they're sitting in a chair, and it's real to them.
And the chair is there.
And the chair's, or the chair's not, it's real
well,
for them.
For them, the chair is there.
Right, but it's not there for anybody else.
That is happening all the time. And, you know, psychiatrists can think about it, can know about it. They don't know how this happens. And this is our world, and we have to be involved in this.
Oh, there's another story, and this is from David Icke, is that he saw this hypnotist. And what the hypnotist did was he asked someone for a volunteer, which was this man that came up, and the daughter was there. And he told the man who was the subject that his daughter was invisible. He couldn't see her. So then he asked the daughter to come up, and she started giggling. He's looking around and couldn't see her. The daughter stood in between the man on the chair and the hypnotist, and then the hypnotist took a pocket watch out and put it in the bag, said, what time is it? He said, oh, it's like 2 o'clock. So, how do you know that? It's right there, you're holding the watch up. he was holding the watch up behind her back,
Yeah.
where it was impossible.
I've actually been present of some hypnosis.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can have a person totally lie between two chairs, the backs of the 2 chairs and totally stiff.
Yeah.
And things like that. Hypnosis actually is also another mystery which we are forgetting and we don't know how to use. So let's say that fourth dimension is learning how to use all these abilities and understanding this. And science is starting to explain it to us. It's not like we are mad and we don't know what.
There's a possible explanation for this. Around the turn of the century, they tried to get a photograph of an electron in orbit. And they had a femtosecond laser and they could do it. So they took a photograph, they didn't see the electron, they saw the probability wave. The electron hadn't formed yet. It hadn't condensed down into physical matter yet. And so, according to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, it should be there. And then they said, okay, let's slow it down a little bit more. So they slowed it down, they slowed it out more, and they slowed it out more. And suddenly the electron was seen in the photograph. Then they realized that the electron was spending 99% of the time in this probability field and only 1% as physical matter.
Yeah, and that is everything.
That's everything. In other words, an iceberg, there's about, 10% that's above the water? It's worse than an iceberg. Only 1% of physical reality is above the water. The rest is underwater. Invisible.
So that's what we have to regain, some of the capacities to start to see the invisible around us. And meanwhile, that doesn't happen to a big majority of people. We will always question it. But that's where we are in the verge of the threshold of getting this, and many people have decided not to be here and they'll die, they'll get the virus, or they have more reasons now to be able to die because they don't want to live this, or they don't want to live this in this body, whatever.
But if 99% of what we think is physical reality is invisible, then all the entities and everything else that's going on around us, that's part of that realm.
Yeah.
So
it's a parallel universe.
Yeah.
And it's what I could say, and we don't want to get into religion. Hell does not exist. It's enough to be in between worlds, which we call the purgatory. That's enough.
Or this could be purgatory. I don't know.
Purgatory, or maybe this one is purgatory where we are in now. Yeah, definitely. We have more about the fifth dimension in our SOLiris website, and about how we are going to get to a luminous Homo sapiens and how it's become the change of metabolism to nitrogen instead of oxygen that will be phosphorus in the center of the hemoglobin. Then also in Spanish we have the cranium changes, that is the flattening of the sphenoid bone, that we create a complete concave cranium so that the pineal gland is right in the center of the cranium and it could illuminate. So this hopefully you can get it translated.